There was once a school that lasted 20 years, taught no reading or writing at all, and produced judges, healers, astronomers and diplomats who carried entire legal systems in memory alone. Fall back, and the oak was not alone. It stood at the heart of a clearing, ringed by standing stones raised long before anyone living could explain why. This was a grove, not a building, not a temple in the way Rome understood the word, but a place set apart all the same. Two figures were walking toward it, one a man, the other a boy of 7, named Faelan, who did not yet know he was walking toward the next 20 years of his life. Sending a child to a Druid's grove was not unusual for a family of any standing. It brought prestige to a household tower Druid among its kin, a voice that carried weight in disputes, in alliances, in the keeping of the old laws. Faelan had not been chosen for any particular gift, he had simply been the son it could be done with. Childhood, in the way his younger brothers and sisters would know it, ended here. The cost was rarely spoken aloud, but it was understood. For Faelan, this walk meant being, in effect, gone not forever, but for most of the years that mattered. Druids did not teach in villages. Their schools, where ancient writers described them at all, are placed in clearings, on islands, in forests far from ordinary life, deliberately apart from the noise of households and herds. Whatever happened here was not meant to be overheard. At the edge of the grove, the man stopped. He did not go in. By the old custom, the father's part ended at the tree line, and before the light had gone from the sky, Faelan watched him walk back the way they had come. What came next did not look like a lesson at all. There was no tablet placed in front of him, no marks scratched into wax, no signs to study. An older voice spoke a verse once, and then waited. Faelan was expected to say it back. He did not the first time, nor the second. The voice repeated it, patient and unhurried, exactly as before. There would be no books to fall back on, here or for the next 20 years. Roman writers who encountered Druids in Gaul recorded something that struck them as strange. According to Julius Caesar, Druids could read and write. They used Greek script for ordinary business, accounts, letters. But their sacred teaching, the verses at the center of their training, were never written down at all. Caesar offered a reason or part of one. Writing the verses down, he believed, would have done two things. The Druids did not want to let the knowledge spread beyond those judged fit to hold it, and let students lean on a page instead of memory. Whether that was the whole truth, or simply what an outsider was told, no one now can say for certain. There may have been other reasons too. A verse spoken aloud, passed from one mouth to another across centuries, carried something a written page did not, the presence of every voice that had carried it before, and to write it down might have been, in some sense, to let it die a little. Whatever the reason, the method did not change, and for Faelan, it did not change for a very long time. Years went by. The boy who had stood beneath the oak grew taller, and the verses he carried grew longer with him. Each day looked much like the one before it. There were mornings when the cold reached into the bones, and afternoons when his concentration slipped however hard he tried to hold it. Not every day went well for everyone. One morning, the older student beside him recited a passage flawlessly that had taken weeks to fix, and said nothing about it. There was no one there to tell. Mornings were given to the laws, the rules that govern land, marriage, theft, and the settling of debts between families. Afternoons belonged to genealogies, the chains of names linking each ruling family to those before it. Evenings, weather permitting, were given to the sky, the same stars, tracked night after night, until their slow return became as familiar as a verse. It was, Faelan came to think, the same lesson the sky itself had been offering long before anyone thought to teach it, that what returns, and is watched closely enough, is never truly lost. The verses were not simply spoken. They were walked, chanted in slow circuits of the grove, step matching syllable, until the rhythm of the body and the rhythm of the words became difficult to separate. A mistake in the steps and a mistake in the line tended to arrive together. On a cold morning, with the ground still wet underfoot, mistakes came more easily than usual. The astronomy was not vague. Centuries later, in Gaul, a bronze tablet known today as the Coligny calendar would be found, a detailed lunar and solar calendar, accurate enough to track a 5-year cycle and correct the drift between moon and sun. It is widely thought to preserve the kind of calendar keeping that schools like this one were built to maintain. All this had a purpose beyond the grove. A druid who had completed this training could be called on to settle a dispute between families or between territories in a way few others could. Later Irish sources describe specialist roles that may echo this. Judges known as Brython, and poesy is known as Philly, whose satire was believed capable of raising blisters on a person's face. Both may reflect older divisions within exactly this kind of training. The same knowledge fixed the dates of festivals, the turning points of the year that every household, whatever their disputes, observed together. A calendar kept correctly mattered to everyone, not only to those who kept it. Healing, too, fell within a druid's range knowledge of plants, their uses and their dangers, passed down the same way as everything else, by repetition rather than by recipe. Pliny the Elder, writing in Rome, described druids cutting mistletoe from an oak with a golden sickle in a ceremony involving white bulls and careful ritual. It is one true detail among a great many, not the center of what druids did, whatever later imaginations made of it. The most striking privilege, recorded by more than one Greek writer, concerned war. Diodorus Siculus and Strabo both described druids walking out between two armies already drawn up for battle, swords raised, and stopping the fighting with nothing but their presence and their word. Anger, Diodorus wrote, yielded to wisdom, even among men not given, by his account, to yielding much at all. None of this was Faelan's, not yet. He was still, by the standards of the Grove, young, and on one particular evening that was made very clear, he had been reciting a genealogy that ran some 40 names in the correct order, without pause. He reached the 31st name, and it was gone, not delayed, not stumbled over, simply gone, as if it had never been there at all. The Grove waited. Among those watching was a second student, older than Faelan by some years, who had stood in this exact place himself more than once. He said nothing. There was nothing to say. This had happened to him too, and would happen to whoever came after Faelan, and there was no punishment for the failure, beyond the failure itself. Faelan was told to begin again, from the first name, and he did. The lesson, though no one stated it aloud, was the one the Grove had been teaching for 20 years, that the cost of getting it wrong here was time, and nothing else. Time, in the end, was the one thing the Grove had never been short of. More of it passed. By the time Faelan was a man grown, the verses no longer needed retrieving. They were simply there, the way the names of his own kin were there, the way the shape of the Grove itself was there. The older student was older still now, no longer a measure of how far Faelan had to go, but someone who walked beside him. One day, word came to the Grove that did not concern a festival, or a birth, or a death. Two groups, kin to two different territories, had gathered with the grievance between them, armed, and facing each other, and waiting. They were waiting, specifically, for someone whose word both sides had been raised to accept without question. The eldest Druid did not go. He sent Faelan. Faelan walked out from beneath the oak, the way his father had walked away from it 20 years before. Ahead of him, across open ground, two groups stood facing each other, close enough that a single thrown spear could have started something neither side could stop. He did not hurry. 20 years had not been spent learning to hurry. He walked until he stood between them, and there, with both sides watching and neither moving, he opened his mouth to speak. What he said next is not part of this account. What is part of it is this: everything Faelan carried into that space between two armies, the law, the genealogies, the calendar of sun and moon, 20 years of verses never once written down, existed nowhere else. Not in any book, not in any archive. Only in him, and in the small number of people who had learned it the same way he had. Almost everything known today about that system comes from the writings of outsiders, Roman and Greek observers describing, from a distance, a kind of learning they were never invited to share. Beneath the oak, now visibly old, there was, by then, another small figure, the same one Faelan had once been, beginning, as he once had, by listening.